Okay, well, I think it's a good time to get started. So thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining, and welcome to our session on ECR Skills for Geochemists. So in general, these sessions are aiming to provide some geochemistry-focused training and advice for PhD students and early career researchers. And we're based in the UK, so it's also a nice chance to get to meet some members of the UK geochemistry community. So all the sessions that we run are free to join, but you'll need to register each time at this link. And the session's also recorded, and so we have lots of previous sessions, including on skills like paper writing or applying for postdocs and fellowships. So you can see other topics at our YouTube page. And if you have ideas for other topics we should cover, then feel free to get in touch with either myself or Fawn, who are organising these sessions. So the Geochemistry Group, I should give you a tiny bit of background on this. So we're a special interest group of the Mineralogical Society of the UK and Ireland in the Jolsoc of London. And our goal is to promote geochemistry as a discipline. But in particular, it's aiming to support those of you in the early career stage of your careers in geochemistry. But also our events are not exclusive to geochemists. We're very happy to see other people who maybe overlap with geochemistry joining our sessions too. And for those of you who might not yet be on the mailing list, then you can use this QR code, and this will allow you to register to see about upcoming events and other sessions that we're running, for example. So I'll leave that there for a moment, and hopefully that will be useful to you. And talking of the Mineralogical Society, just to advertise one of their upcoming events. So Savannah Warren is giving a talk, running a seminar on stable isotopes. And there's a link here that you can use to register. So again, this would be free to attend. It would be an online session, but you will need to follow this link to be able to register for her seminar. Finally, a few bits of housekeeping. So this meeting's being recorded, so it will be posted online afterwards on YouTube so that other people can access it. So please abide by a code of conduct, be respectful of each other, basically. Thank you very much to those of you who've already sent us questions in. So we'll be going through some of those questions in the session that follows. There should also hopefully be a Q&A box. So if you have questions that come to mind as you're listening to our panelists, then you can add those to the box and we'll see if we can answer them. And if not, we'll try and answer them later. So that's almost it from me, other than to introduce our four speakers, and they're going to talk about things they wish they knew when they started out on their PhDs. So the great news is that all four of our speakers have recently, or fairly recently, completed their PhDs. So they're really well placed to tell you about how to go through this process. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Fawn, who's going to be chairing the questions for our four panelists. So thank you very much. I hope you find the session useful.
Thank you, David. Hi, guys, I'm Fawn. So we're going to start off with a background for each of the panelists. For each of you, would you mind briefly introducing yourselves with the topic of your PhD and what you do now if you've already moved on?
I can start, I guess. So hi, I'm Serena. I very recently finished my PhD. It was in North Atlantic paleoceanography, so study of the ocean over the last 10,000 years. And I did that through sort of geochemical and sedimentological analysis of marine sediments. And it's really cool, it's really varied. What I'm doing now is pretty much similar. I've got sort of like a short-term lab tech employment until January when I'm going to be moving to Cardiff to start my postdoc again in paleoceanography. So yeah, it's me.
Yeah, I can go next. So my name is Elisa. I got my PhD on March. My PhD was at the Open University, and I was investigating how critical metals are mobilized during partial melting of metapelites. So it was basically a PhD based on metamorphic petrology and several geochemistry techniques, but particularly the laser ablation, ICBMS, and then modeling as well, basically thermodynamic modeling. And then now I'm doing a postdoc at the University of St. Andrews, trying to investigate the nitrogen cycle, but also other trace elements and how they are also mobilized during metamorphic reactions of metapelites and partial melting of metapelites. So yeah, that's me.
Hello, Matthew. I just finished a PhD in Birmingham studying organic geochemistry of some sedimentary rocks up in Iceland, about 5 million years old and full of organic rich lignite horizons that I studied. And I'm now out of academia. I now work in the water sector. So I'm currently at work at Severn Trent, the water company, as a data analyst, trying to tackle some of the less palatable reasons that water companies end up in the news at the moment. So raw sewage spills, and trying to get a handle on that and improve, hopefully, that situation.
Right. Hi everyone. I'm Chen. I finished my PhD on August from St. Andrews, and now I'm a postdoc in Cardiff. So I'm a oceanographer, and I work on oceanography and paleoclimate. So my PhD is about using boron isotope to reconstruct the oceanic pH and PCO2 in the polar regions. So I study the Southern Ocean and also the subpolar North Pacific over the past few glacial interglacial cycles. I also work on the methods developments as well, try to improve the boron isotope analysis on the mass spec and also like all this wet chemistry stuff. It's fun to start a postdoc right after my PhD. That's pretty much about me.
Thank you very much, everyone, for those introductions. Before we dive into more specific questions, are there any main or interesting misconceptions you had about doing a PhD that turned out to be completely wrong? Maybe that's good news. Maybe no one had any misconceptions. Is that true?
I'll go. I think for me, one of my misconceptions that the title that I applied for, as in, the project title, would be exactly representative of the end product. It definitely wasn't. It evolves. It's a long project, changes along the way.
That makes a lot of sense. I see that happening quite a lot in PhDs. So that's a good warning for everyone else adopting their PhD. If it moves, it's not that shocking. So we're going to move on to some research skills questions and lab skills questions. So first, are there any skills that you didn't have when you started your PhD but proved most valuable to develop, either for benefiting your PhD itself or after you left your PhD?
Yeah, I can start on that. I would say like data curation, just having for me, what I found out by the end of the PhD was it's amazing to have like an Excel spreadsheet with absolutely everything on it, so that you can put on Python or whatever coding thing you have, and you can just do everything with one file, and it's very practical. And coding for me is like having your data very clear and very easy to access, and coding would be the two for me. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Elisa. Building on that, does anyone have any strategies that help them become more independent, competent, or efficient in the lab? That's very much building on that last question.
I think first of all, you will need to pretty much focus on what you're doing, and you need to know the instructions very well. And also, do not be afraid to ask for the help from the peers, from the others, from the lab managers. I think these are very important to improve your efficiency in the lab. And also, I think it's also pretty important to know the basic concept of the isotopic system, what you're doing, so you know that in which part you messed up, you know how to fix it and what's the consequence it will be. And also make sure you know the instrument. I wouldn't say like 100% well, but you need to know like what is your instrument about, and the software, everything. You need to get familiar with that. Yeah, and I mean for fresh PhDs, I think the most important thing is do not be afraid to ask. If you mess up something and you just hide it away from everyone else, and that's gonna cause like serious consequences, and also is they will make you, you know, waste your time. So wasting your time. So I think my biggest suggestion would be do not be afraid to ask.
That's a great segue into our next question, Chen, which is what were the most helpful aspects of your lab culture or your lab group? Was it asking questions or something else?
Sorry, Fong, could you say it again?
Sorry, what were the most helpful aspects of your lab culture or your lab group?
Oh,
For anyone.
it's epic. I mean, I love my group in St. Andrews. Like we also hang out to the pub after work sometimes. And you know, it's a clean lab, so you can't really, you know, play your mobile, you know, in the lab because everything needs to be covered to prevent the blanks. So we chat quite a lot in the lab, you know, everything, you know. But also make sure you focus on what you're doing. And everybody is very keen to help. Everybody is very nice. They won't turn you down simply because they don't want to or something, or just they don't have time or something. And also we were in a very flexible lab, so we don't really have a strict working hours. So basically our lab is 24/7, so we don't need to worry about like, you know, if you don't finish that before 5 or 4:30, you will have to go, something like that. So we have more flexibility in St. Andrews. I think that's really great. Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Paul.
Yeah, definitely. Does anyone else have anything else to say about positive aspects of lab culture or lab groups that they've experienced?
Speaking as someone who started their PhD just as COVID finished, really, it made me appreciate that lab groups are a real conveyor belt of knowledge. And the people who've been on that conveyor belt for a few years, they've picked up so much expertise by that point, even in the small casual moments. And when that conveyor belt breaks down, like let's say COVID or a big lab shutdown, building back up that rich foundation of experience can be quite hard earned. So if you've got people in your lab who have been there for a few years or have been at other labs and worked in other environments, really make use of their experiences, their knowledge, talk to them, ask them questions. I'm sure, speaking as sort of as people who've moved through their PhD, you're always happy to talk to people who are at the beginning of their adventure and want to just make sure that people are informed and safe and working well.
Thank you. So I'm going to move on from lab skills towards more research skills based questions. How did any of you decide how much time to dedicate writing different parts of your PhD? For example, literature reviews, papers that you're trying to publish versus your thesis. Does it take longer than expected?
I'll try and have a go. I suppose to the possible disappointment of a couple of my supervisors, I didn't really publish papers during my PhD, which I don't really regret at all. I think that's I wanted to focus on getting my data and actually writing the thesis and not stressing myself out with that. But I think that the longest part of my PhD was probably like actually collecting the data and analyzing the data. And I wish I'd started writing earlier, I think, would be my advice. Just because you can write a lot of your literature review fairly early on, and you can write your methods up as you go. And getting those little wins in early is really, I think that would be really beneficial. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I actually wrote my first chapter in the pretty much very last stage of my PhD when I tried to write up everything, because I feel like even though you say, oh, of course you can start everything from beginning, but I just realized after the full year study of what you're doing, you understand these literatures and these ideas and much better than when you just started. So I didn't actually start writing up my first chapter, which is literature review, at the beginning of my PhD. And I just realized if I really did that, I'll probably have to rewrite everything in the very last stage as well. So I mean, it's really, very on different aspect. I mean, in different field maybe, but just for personally, what I think, I would probably put it in my 3rd year or 4th year when I have an idea of a project already before I initially start writing up. Yeah, so about my PhD, I think data generation is, of course, very important and very time consuming. But since I was in a very flexible and high efficient lab, so I think generating data is never be a problem for me. So the time I spend on the writing is, of course, it's massive, right? But I think the best advice I can give is don't put everything like in the very last stage of a PhD. So once you have developed something, for example, if you have generated some data, you discuss with your supervisor, maybe you give a talk in a conference or something, so you know how the story is like, and then you can start writing up. You don't have to wait until the very last stage of your, thesis writing stage to do that. That's the advice I would give. And also, if you have any method development part of your thesis, I would say go for that one first. So I have a method paper about born isotope analysis. I started at the very beginning of my PhD in parallel with generating data because that was improving the method. So as I finish that, I write up and I turn in to a journal, and so that won't bother me quite a lot. At the very last stage of my PhD, I can just simply copy and paste into my thesis, and that's really helpful. Sorry.
That was great, thank you. And lastly, on research skills or writing skills, do you have any tips for anyone to improve their writing style?
Practice, get writing, get feedback. That's how it's a skill like anything, and it gets better by doing it. It's what your supervisory team is there for. So give them content, and hopefully they will give you feedback. Generally, my advice would be give stuff to your supervisors with plenty of time, and maybe it will come back in good time to use it. But yeah, get writing, and also try not to take feedback too much to heart. It's there to steer you and guide you. And I remember the first time I sent something into my supervisor, and it was just red mark after red mark after red mark. And the more times I gave them stuff, the fewer red marks I got back. So you get better.
Yeah. Also, I want to, speak out as a non-native speaker of English. So I was born and raised in China, and you guys are pretty much native speakers. So before we start into these English-speaking countries, you need to pass the IELTS test. And I can tell you guys that IELTS test, I mean, the English you learn from the IELTS test and the English you actually use in academia are totally different. So in the IELTS test, when you do the writing test, you will need to write this fancy vocabulary using complex, these kind of Victoria style, like vocabularies, fancy words. But actually, that's not what you should use in academia. You always need to write like short, straightforward, and clear sentences instead of writing up like a long, complex, and splendid vocabulary. The words you pick for. So actually, academic English writing is hard, but also it's not as hard as you think. So yeah, ask advice for a supervisor, and it will get better and better when you write more and more, and also read more literatures, and maybe try to mimic, a few of them, to see the structure of the sentence they wrote, and I think you will start, getting better from it.
Yeah, I just want to say I second what Matthew said, but also as a non-native speaker, I also second what Chen Zhu said. And I also want to add that, like, I think that in academia, for some reason, in the PhD, we have this idea that the first draft has to be so good and that we have to impress our supervisors or stuff. But one of these days, I got a draft from a paper my supervisor is writing, and I got to read the first draft. And he was like, now you'll see that actually even him that is like a professor, he also has like a very poor draft. So we have to kind of abandon this idea that the first draft is going to be like magical and super well written. And actually, if you have friends in other areas in industry and stuff like that, they also, like, all pieces of text these days, they pass through several eyes. So feedback is super healthy, and the first draft is more about the ideas rather than the most beautiful English you can write. So I think that's something super important to keep in mind. So yeah, that's my
Thank you very much, everyone. So we're going to move on from our research and lab skills towards more planning and managing a PhD. So we have a question submitted from an audience member, which is, how do we balance lab work with reading, literature, and writing all at the same time?
Sorry, please go ahead.
The advice which I was told throughout my PhD, it kind of depends on your lab day. So sometimes you have like a full day of lab work, and that's pretty much all you can do. But if you do have some flexibility, trying to tackle maybe the writing and the reading, or certainly the writing in like the morning or whenever you have the most energy, that might be different. Try and do that, and then if you've got some lab work that maybe you find routine at that point, try and tackle that like another time. So just sort of go by your own sort of energy throughout the day, I guess. I suppose, yeah, I don't know what else. I'll think of something else in a second, maybe.
I'm not sure like how everybody's like, but for me, I feel like, the brain can only function properly for academia 6 hours maximum. If you like writing or reading, or fully focus on what you're doing for academia, I think it's between, like, for me, it's like around 6 hours per day. So if you have really important things, like for example, like, some concept or theory or idea or things you want to write up, I think you better put it on the most efficient time you have of the day. Maybe for you guys, maybe someone is in the morning when they get up. Someone like me, it's like at night. After I take a night shower, my mind is more clear to do so. So it's about the time management of your own efficient hours. Uh, and also, I think to balance the literature readings and writing, and also your lab time, is depending on your lab management. So I know not every lab is like St. Andrews that you can work 24/7, right? For example, in Cardiff, they have very strict time for the lab works. So I think if you are in a lab like that, you need to basically spend more time in the, sorry, how to say so? So you better better use the hours of the working hours that have been set by the lab instead of use these hours to do your literature reviews or writings. Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I want to give about this part.
Thank you very much. So next question is, were there any habits or systems that you put in place that really improved your progress and prevented you getting into burnout throughout the PhD?
Yeah. I think before I moved to Scotland, and I don't really have much drinking culture, I don't understand the pub. But I just realized this bit of British culture is really great because just imagine just like have a long day in the lab, you've been struggling with the instrument, you finally get it work and the overnight sequence is on. And maybe it's Friday night, you went out, hang out with your friends, you go to the pub, you just chat, you had a few pints. And I feel that really helps. That really helps. And also do some hikings in your weekends, just to embrace the nature. And also, I feel like if you feel burnout, take a rest. If you really feel like your brain is not functioning properly, maybe go to a pub, had a few pints, and then go back and sleep. That's my advice.
No, you go on.
Yeah, mine's very short. I would say like find a hobby that you cannot be thinking about your PhD while you're doing. Like for me, during my PhD was rock climbing. I don't think you can think about geochemistry while you are doing that. And also just use your leave days, just use them. Don't think that like, oh my God, the PhD is not everything. Like you deserve to take like extended weekend or like a week off and just go traveling, visiting your friends or family or whatever, just yeah. The PhD cannot be your whole life, just as your job wouldn't be your whole life. And that would be my advice.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say about taking the leave days, 100%.
I'll just add, you can also say no. There's always endless amounts of things to join in with a PhD, and you can say no.
That all sounded like really good advice. Thank you, guys. So then, talking about working with supervisors, what did you learn about working with supervisors that you think would have helped you earlier if you knew sooner? Or if I can add to that question, how can you better receive and give constructive feedback with your supervisors?
I don't know if I'm gonna answer the question, but I feel like what I learned and that I wish I realized sooner in my PhD, in my relationship with my supervisors, is that it's okay to disagree with them. And I had 4 supervisors, so actually it was very common for the 4 of us and the 5 of us in reality to disagree on some things. And it's okay, and that's actually very healthy, and it led to better science overall. And eventually there are some disagreements that are very stylistic in a sense, in terms of like writing and how to frame questions. And you should not give your point of view away just to do what your supervisor is telling. I feel like it's you should go on with your own stuff. That's my advice. But it's very hard to develop because obviously they have much more experience. But I would say like take your opinion just as serious. It's something that is very healthy to develop during your PhD.
My feeling is together. So my PhD supervisor James is really nice, and he's a very high energetic person. So he always give you what you want. But to better get the constructive, suggestions, or like I would say sometimes once you want to ask something, you don't ask for the meeting first. I just realized you try to write up a very constructive email first and list the question you have. Sometimes once you list it, you found I actually solved it. I just realized I just nailed it. And you need to have a very, constructive to-do list prepared for your meeting with your supervisor instead of just go, hey, I have a question about this. How do I solve it? And these kind of meetings are sometimes not very efficient, and peer supervisors are busy. You might run out of your time just on some very unimportant stuffs. So I would say once you want the help from your supervisor, try to write a very constructive email first instead of just pop up and ask. And in the meeting, know what you want to ask, and also try to manage the time in the slot you have instead of going, at different directions. And also, just one last thing is, you are clearly an expert. Probably you know the project of your stuff better than anybody else. And PhD supervisors may give you some opinions that doesn't look right to you at the very beginning. Sometimes you say, oh, that's bullshit. But I wouldn't suggest you guys to turn them down. And you should go back and think about what they say and what they think. And sometimes they are right. And you are just probably focused on too broad a picture or too detailed pictures, and you don't see the issues that are not be seen by you. So I would suggest that you should value the suggestion given by your supervisor instead of just give your opinion towards their opinions. Right after they say it.
Thank you. So we have a final question in the planning and management section, and this is again submitted by an audience member, and it's regarding note-taking. So are there any early mistakes to avoid when you start note-taking and data collection to avoid future frustration further down the line?
Put everything on your OneDrive. Put every data on your OneDrive. Put every code on your OneDrive, because that happens to me before. I had liquid damage to my laptop, and it takes a while to recover the data. I'm glad the hard drive is not damaged, but it do struggle me quite a lot. So if your institution give you OneDrive access, maybe 100 giga, maybe 1 TB or whatever, put your data or everything on your OneDrive, or you have a portable hard drive that you can back up your data or code routinely. That's my suggestion.
Mine is you won't remember it later. Write it down. I was forever guilty of going, I'll remember that, I'm sure. And then the following week have no clue what I needed to do or whatever. So just if in doubt, write it down.
My suggestion is that sometimes if you are particularly writing down like the parameters or something about a machine you just used the first time, show the lab tech and ask, am I missing something? Like, is something else necessary for the publication later on? And they know the machine, right? It's their machine usually, and they will like have the best. They will be the best person to revise what you wrote down. So that's fine.
I think I would say from the beginning, try and get a good reference management system going. So either Zotero or EndNote or something like that. And sometimes on these, you can make notes on the PDFs within those referencing softwares. So I definitely recommend that. Although sometimes you might find that handwriting your notes on these papers is also quite good. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I know I'm the one asking you questions, but this question has sparked such joy in me that I feel the need to answer it myself as well. If you have a lab book, take photos of the lab book and save them somewhere in case your lab book is burned in a fire, lost, borrowed by someone. Yeah, have a good lab book and then back up the lab book, even if you are taking hand-on questions. hand-done notes. So moving on to the next section now is preparing for next steps after the PhD. So first, what are the best strategies for networking at conferences, both during your PhD and when thinking about finishing up your PhD and the next steps?
Yeah, this is a hard one because it's tricky, right? Academia is tricky. I would say that maybe think about it very early on, and you don't have to set your mind to something, right? But like I wanted to be in academia, and for me it was very much like emailing people when I found a paper interesting, just to like say hello or ask questions, and in conferences going and interacting with these people. So I think that was the main thing I was doing during my PhD, to think about my future. And also, underrated tip I have is keep your CV updated as you go, because by the end of the PhD, you have a lot of skills, and it's just better to already have them scribbled somewhere. So yeah, those are my tips.
I would say maybe do not be afraid of the big names. So actually, they are pretty nice. Maybe you met, oh, this is a big name, has like 10,000 citation on Google Scholars, but actually they are not like furious, right? So as a fresh PhD, as a PhD student, I think you will need the help from your supervisor if you're in a conference. Maybe you could just go straight ask your PhD supervisor, hey, I want to know this guy. Could you help me introduce me to him? Or you can just go and just ask if you have the ball, but I think it's fine. And also, that's why I think pub is important. Even you don't drink alcohol, but maybe just go and ask. No, they would party after conference night. Basically every night during the conference. Maybe you can just join a group if they're going to the pub. You can just join in, and then just chat, and then people get familiar with each other, and it's easier to build the connections. And also never give up any chance. I mean, just use every minute, try to sell your things, right? And maybe it's a poster session. Even these people didn't come to your poster, maybe you can ask your supervisor to help you grab some. I got a student did a really good job, like in some field. Would you want to have a look at something? You can ask your PhD supervisor to help you, or your friends, or people in your field to help you do that too. Because even like, for example, me and Elsia, we don't know each other, but we have someone in between. For example, phone. Could you help me introduce Elsia to me, right? And people brings people together by other people's, right? So that's really important. And do not be afraid. I think that's really, really important. And I know it's not easy for a lot of people who are shy, but also for a career, I think sometimes you need to have some balls like that. And also, I would say keep an eye on the website, and also, I'm sorry, I think that's why you need to do the pub chat, right? Because some information are not really on the website. Once they say, oh, I actually applying for a proposal or something, or I actually got a proposal being granted, but they've been not been posted on the website yet. So the message like only spread it like in a small group. So if you know them, you know the information, and you can get yourself better prepared for these kind of job if you're interested in. I think that's important.
I suppose another thing is that by getting involved actually in your own department, so for instance, like during my PhD, I organized a seminar series. And so through that, I was able to meet and communicate with a lot of other people in my field from external to my university. And that was really cool, because then you have to introduce them, get to know them like that, and go for coffee with them before the talk, and that doing those sorts of things and just becoming a name within your department, and then also outside of that through those sorts of systems. I recommend doing something like that.
Great, thank you. So talking about experiences during a PhD, what experiences during a PhD were unexpectedly helpful for your career path?
I guess I'll provide some context of life outside of academia as I've headed on. But something an academic said to me, it was after a G group up in Durham. They said, there is more freedom outside of academia than you think, and there's less freedom inside academia than you think. You know, I think there are perceptions perhaps about what academia is like or not like, and they're not always necessarily true. And if you want to pursue a career in academia, fantastic, go and do it. But equally, there's a whole world out there that is not academia, and a PhD might be the end of your journey inside that sector, and that's fine. So, you know, don't feel railroaded into one path or another. It's there for your choosing.
Building on leaving academia, we have a question about post-PhD careers. So at what stage did you start thinking seriously about your career after your PhD? And how did you decide whether or not academia, industry, or other paths were best for you?
I'll go again. So I finished my PhD about a month ago, in terms of corrections and all of that. I submitted in August. I was applying for jobs in about July. Part of the issue with applying for jobs post a PhD is you can't apply a year away because no one's going to be interested. You know, you can't say, oh, my notice period is 12 months. You just won't be that likely a candidate. So you have to sort of wait until you're about 3-4 months away before you can start looking seriously, I found, and start sort of progressing through the initial phases of application. So for me, that was about the right window. You know, I knew I wanted to leave academia maybe a year and a half before the end of my PhD, and started looking seriously a few months before I handed in.
Thank you very much. For everyone else, how soon before you finish your PhD did you start looking at jobs after the PhD?
So by the like last year of my PhD, I guess I started to apply for things just to like practice interviews and things like that. And I think I had some interviews in industry. And during the interview, when they explained the role, that's basically when I realized, oh, maybe I want to stay in academia just because of the science, the question-oriented things that we do in academia. Like, this is the question, go and answer the question kind of it. But obviously in industry, there's also that. It's just done in a slightly different way. But that's basically when I started to realize, oh yes, I actually want to stay in academia. Even like the tone of the interviews in academia, I was like, oh, the interview even is more interesting to me than in the industry one. But yeah, this is a very hard question. Yeah, this is what I can say.
I think the first thing I applied to was in like March, and I submitted in September. And I didn't really do too many applications when I was actually writing up. Yeah, but I kept an ear out via like my lab group and like other surrounding lab groups to see what opportunities were coming up, or if there are any opportunities for like short-term things to carry me over whilst I searched for the postdocs after I submitted. So just sort of seeing what funding is out there and like that might not necessarily be immediately advertised. That's sort of what you can do.
Thank you. Moving on to the same theme of what you do after your PhD, whether it's a postdoc or industry, how relevant does your thesis topic or statement have to be to the job you're applying to in the future? Like, can they be similar? How transferable do they have to be? Do they have to be the same topic? Does it matter?
Well, my postdoc is really similar to what I'm doing during my PhD. So I'll be doing boron isotope here in Cardiff. So also like helping them set up the boron isotope in this place. So I don't really have the position to say how close they are because that's exactly what they asked for. They want a person who know how to do boron in Cardiff. But when I go through the application of this position, there are a few questions that are quite interesting to me. I think maybe people who just start their PhD can can be prepared that as well. Is they'll be interested in the outreach. So when we doing our PhD, we focus on the research and our thesis pretty much 100%. Also, in some institution they will ask, have you ever been in the scientific outreach before? Have you been involved in the scientific communications? I think for fresh PhDs who are doing PhD, maybe it's not a bad thing to volunteer in some science events or like GeoBus in St. Andrews, and I think that may help you with the job application, and also. Well, right. Basically, everything else is about what your PhD is like. If you know multi-collector ICP-MS, people would, if even you are doing like a different isotopic system, but if you're familiar with the software, for example, if you're using Neptune or using like whatever, people know people know that you know what you do, what you're doing. And even you are doing different isotopic system, maybe there's some knowledge that are transferable, like, oh, how would the plasma energy impact my analysis, something like that. Maybe you will see a different view from others. If you know how to do column chromatography before, and the job requires column chromatography, people will probably interested in you as well. Yeah, that's pretty much everything I want to say, but I really don't have the best position to answer this question.
Yeah, I also don't have the best position because my PhD was trace elements in migmatites, and my postdoc is trace elements and a volatile element in migmatites as well. But what I will say is that most of the interviews I had, they were mostly based on the fact that I had the analytical techniques that I had, because most of the interviews I had was actually planetary sciences, so either moon, meteorites, or like Mars geology. And it was basically like, oh, she knows what we need to analyze in these rocks, even though I barely looked at these rocks before. So I think the analytical techniques and modeling, is basically the most transferable skills you have, and that could lend you jobs in different areas as well.
Thank you. So talking about the academic job market, we've already mentioned quite a few skills already. Are there any extra skills the PhD students now should be doing to prepare themselves for the academic job market?
I think something which you can do is to get involved in the supervision of master students or co-supervision of master students, because that's something that came up on my postdoc applications. So that involves possibly coming up with project ideas alongside your supervisors, and also just advising in the lab and things like that, and bouncing off ideas. That's a really valuable thing to do. And as I said earlier, getting involved in like your department activities and showing like an enthusiasm for like the research environment that way, I would say is like a really valuable thing to do too.
Thank you. And then if we're moving on to be writing grants, whether it's for an entire fellowship or if it's for a small pocket of money, have you got any tips on how to write a successful grant for your PhD or for your next position?
I'd say so. I got a grant during my PhD for some radiocarbon analysis, and it was you have to be very, very concise in these proposals, and so getting help from your supervisors in terms of like the writing style because they would have done this quite a few times probably. That's the most valuable thing you can do, I guess. Yeah, it's a tough thing to do. But yeah.
Yeah, so I only had a small grant to my PhD to do some analysis. It was to do micro CT analysis, and it was through the Excite program. I recommend people in geochemistry to look for it. It's very interesting. And my main tip is to usually these grants to do analysis, you reach out to the lab techs before or the people running the equipment, and usually you see if they're interested in your idea, and they will give great notes on it, like involve them. They want to be involved. Lab techs are sometimes some of the great scientists you can have. So like involve people around you, like people want to make things work. And usually in grants, yeah, it's the same as papers, like involve the people that are going to be involved in the science, and they will help you out.
That was great. Thanks, guys. And in the last section of preparing for next steps, does anyone have any good tips for writing a great CV?
I had to write quite a few CVs of late to get into the role I'm in. My experience was you got no feedback, absolutely no feedback on CVs. It was really tough. So if you find people who are willing to look over them, take up that opportunity because employers or prospective, jobs, you're not guaranteed feedback from them. So ask people to look over them. And my advice would be get it really concise. Really think about what are my transferable skills? What are the things that I think are valuable in my skill set? And make them really obvious on your CV. That's about it. If it's useful to know, I applied for a job at Severn Trent, didn't get it. But the hiring manager sent my application to a different hiring manager, and now I'm in a job. So it's often how you end up in places is very circumspect and very dependent on little opportunities along the way. So having a CV is one thing, but then having it out there and being in the running is another thing. So yeah, that would be my advice.
I would say that during my PhD project, we had a exercise of doing a CV, and we had people in both industry and in academia in my project, and the reviews were very different. And eventually, in the end of the training, what they told was, the CVs for an academic and an industry position are completely different. Academia one, you probably put every single thing you have done in your life since high school, and in industry, they want to know what can you do and what have you done. And how does and not everything you have done, what have you done that immediately relates to the job you are applying. So I have maybe 10 CVs that I change slightly for different positions. So my tip is you're gonna have a lot of CVs and you're gonna get good at it by the time you get a position. But you have to be ready to put the thought on the CV on how to get each position. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. So we have now got 4 minutes left until the end of the webinar, which is going to bring us perfectly to our final reflections. Is there any piece of practical or crucial advice that you would give someone in their first few months of a PhD, or you would want to have given yourself in your first few months of your PhD?
Feeling overwhelmed with the literature is normal and you will be okay, basically.
Yeah. My would be you're gonna open several doors of research, and some of them are gonna lead nowhere. And you're gonna have some data in your PhD that is gonna be like not used, but it's gonna develop interesting things, in you, like in your scientific brain. So don't be too worried if you put some energy into something that didn't end up in your thesis, because it might develop later on into something.
Just to build on that exact point, just as there are failures along the way that you don't anticipate, there are wins that you don't anticipate as well. And being opportunistic in that respect yields results, as well as having to say, okay, I'll shelve that and, I'll have to leave that for another day.
Thank you, everyone. Chen, do you have any final thoughts of advice for early PhD students? Are you feeling quite happy?
If you can finish your stuff in a day, don't leave it to the second day, because on the second day you have other things to do as well. Maybe that's not politically right, but if you are not really tired on weekend, and if you can work. If you feel like you can read papers and you have nothing else to do, read it. If you come up with some ideas that you think it's worthwhile to write it down. But also, I feel like work days or weekend, that's really for normal people. For PhD students, if you want to do something great, if you're really interested in it, you need to be driven by the interest and also your ability, right? Some people need to rest like 2 days or 3 days in a week, and for some people, maybe 1 day is enough. So PhD is really short. Time flies quickly, and people mood changes quickly as well. If you feel like it's a really good day to work, use it efficiently, effectively. That's my suggestion.
Thank you, everybody, for all of your advice and tips and personal experiences you've given us for the last hour. We're wrapping up with 1 minute left of the seminar. David, have you got anything to add for the end?
Thanks, Fawn. Yeah, thanks for your great job sharing this. Thanks everyone for all your inputs. I've been trying to keep very quiet as someone who's now on the other side of these things as the kind of supervisor, not sticking my oar in. But it's been really interesting. Like it's really interesting and useful from that sort of supervising side as well to always get these kind of nuggets of tips and information from everyone. So I found it really really interesting and really useful as well. So yeah, so thanks to everyone who joined. The video should go up on YouTube at some point, and we'll try and have some more sessions in the new year on other topics relevant to life in and around academia and geochemistry. So yeah, everyone enjoy your afternoons, and thanks again so much to all the panelists for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.